Scott Braddock from the Quorum Report joins us this morning.
Hi,
Good
Erin.
morning,
Good
Scott.
to see you this morning.
Good to see you as well. Of course, first big question, what do you think Perry is going to do?
Who knows, right? I mean, if he's proven anything, he's good at keeping us guessing. We don't know exactly whether or not he's going to announce for re-election, whether he's going to say anything about his potential, maybe presidential ambitions once again. He may say that he's starting a national campaign to promote conservative values. I've heard that. I've also heard in the last few days that he has not been returning the phone calls of some of his past major contributors. Doesn't sound like the kind of activity that someone who's running for re-election would be engaged in. Usually, the people who give you money for your campaigns, you want to call them right back, and that hasn't been happening apparently over the past few days. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does, and again, this is something he's very good at, just keeping us guessing. Yeah,
for sure. What about Wendy Davis with the filibuster? Do you think she is Texas's best Democratic choice at this point in the presidential run?
Well, unfortunately for her, yes, she is the best chance, and I say that because it's just a bad time for Democrats. You know, even though she does substantially better than most other Democrats would do in a poll against Governor Perry, it probably says more about his weakness than her strength. There's still really not a functioning Democratic Party in Texas. The Republican primaries is where all the action really happens when there's a statewide race, and so Governor Perry has been very good over the years about cultivating that conservative base. You know, when he was talking about Wendy Davis and her experience growing up, you know, the child of a single mother and then being a single mother herself, and Democrats saw that as an attack against Wendy Davis. Conservatives saw it as something that was just a pro-life message. The truth is, some folks might be reading too much into that about whether or not Governor Perry is going to run again, because he might say those things anyway, whether he was going to run again for office or not. Wendy Davis right now has become the face of this flashpoint, this abortion issue, but it should be noted that most Texans are not concerned about abortion as their top priority. Texans are concerned about the same things that, you know, that Americans at large are concerned about. Jobs, the economy. We have an outsized concern about immigration here because we're a border state. But abortion, I think only 2 to 3% of Texans say that is one of their top priorities. So even though it's something people are focused on right now, if you're going to build a campaign for statewide office, you would have to find a way to resonate on a whole host of issues and not just on abortion. And right now, that's what is propping her up, so to speak, in these polls. That's what people are focused on right now. But moving forward, you'd have to have a message that appeals to people across the spectrum. And right now, she isn't able to do that because she and others are focused on the abortion issue because that's what's in front of the legislature right now.
Got it. Yeah, I've seen some angry messages on Facebook. What about education, or what about fill in the blank? So good point there. Talk about this abortion bill, the protests that we've seen at the Capitol. Do you think these are just going to get more crowded, the protests, or do you think the crowd's going to lighten a little?
I think it might get even more crowded there. We're going to see, you know, as you mentioned, the House and Senate come back on Tuesday, and of course that'll be after we know a little bit more about Governor Perry's future, so that may give us another clue. But when you look at the protests over the last couple of weeks, you saw for sure more of the pro-choice, the folks in the orange shirts rather than the pro-life folks in the blue shirts. I think you're going to see more of both going forward. I think both sides are getting really charged up, really activated, and that's what the abortion issue does. It's not something where there's a lot of common ground, right? There's not a lot, as your expert said earlier in the show, there might be some tweaking of the language here, but I think what this probably does for both sides is give them a chance to get their bases excited, the liberal and conservative bases of the Democratic and Republican parties excited once again about Texas politics. Something interesting is that when it comes to this issue, you have heard from a lot of people who usually don't care about politics whatsoever, suddenly interested in this because it is so exciting, but politics has that boring part to it also, and the question is whether or not these people who are excited now can stay engaged going forward.
As Democrats manage to shoot down the bill the first go-round, as it comes back, do you think they've accomplished anything?
I think what they have accomplished, and this is purely political, they have accomplished the feat of getting people excited about politics, people, as we mentioned, who just were not excited about it whatsoever before. The challenge for Democrats will be to keep those people engaged, but when it comes to the actual legislation, Republicans have the votes to ram through whatever they want to ram through, and that's another reason. You know, I heard from a lot of Capitol insiders, a lot of the old-timers at the building, who said to me that whole deal deal with the way the Senate melted down, and Dewhurst, the Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, was trying to ram this thing through. It seemed like a real failure on his part because he let the Senate get out of control, and it just wasn't necessary. The Republicans have the votes to do this, and they have the governor's office. The governor called them back into session the very next day. He said, we're going to do this abortion legislation whether the pro-choice folks like it or not. So it just underscored the fact that that meltdown and the way things were being rammed through, and they were sort of damming the torpedoes and throwing out the rule book to try to pass this on that fateful evening, it just wasn't necessary.
So during the previous special session, the transportation bill, the punishment for 17-year-old capital murder fell through the cracks. Do you think we're going to see those again this second go-round?
Well, they've been put on the call. The governor says that the legislature does need to address those, and it was sort of used to try to keep Democrats as well as some moderate Republicans who would tell you to your face, would say that they're pro-life and they're for these restrictions, but maybe they're not all that excited about it. These issues, the transportation funding and the juvenile justice issues, were used as sort of like bait to keep them around, because these are things that they do need to address, and these are things where there is some compromise. There's broad agreement that we need to do something about the sentencing for the 17-year-old murderers. There's broad agreement that we have to have more funding for transportation in this state. I mean, you're looking at we're looking at a proposal that would give us about $1 billion a year extra for roads in the state, when TxDOT says just to maintain current congestion, just for it to be just as nice as it is on Mopac now or on 35 now, we need $4 billion a year just to keep that current congestion. So this is just a Band-Aid, but it does start to move us in the right direction.
And finally, do you think Governor Perry is going to pull anything else out of his hat, anything new that we haven't seen yet?
Well, again, he likes to keep us guessing, doesn't he? So we'll see about that. But as they tackle these big issues, and abortion certainly taking up most of the bandwidth right now, it seems they're going to stay with just the three issues that we've talked about: the abortion, the transportation funding, and the juvenile justice issue.
All right, Scott Braddock, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Erin.